It was just after 3 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I remember because I had just poured myself a cup of coffee, planning to sit down for a quiet hour before diving back into work. The sun was bright outside, pouring golden light through the living room window, and everything felt normal until that bell. When I opened the door, there stood a man wearing a beige utility jumpsuit with a reflective vest, a clipboard in hand, and a badge clipped to his chest. He had a firm expression, sunglasses, and a voice that sounded rehearsed. "Afternoon," he said. "I'm from the city's utilities division. We're doing scheduled maintenance on the power lines in this neighborhood. I need to check your meter, might lose power for a little while." I looked at him, puzzled. I hadn't received any notification. Usually, there's an email or text from the city's system. No one mentioned anything about maintenance. I said. He quickly responded, "Yeah, last-minute schedule change. Some urgent rerouting due to transformer issues. Shouldn't take long, but I need access to the back." He seemed confident, not nervous, just a guy doing his job, or so I thought. I nodded and walked him through to the backyard. He moved with purpose, glanced around, and then crouched near the meter. He scribbled something onto his clipboard and muttered to himself, "Yeah, this one's on the list. Gonna have to cut it off briefly." I stood there, watching. He unclipped something from his belt, reached into the box, and that's when I heard the distinct click and everything inside my house went silent. Lights out, AC off, total power cut. He turned to me, nodded, and said, "Should be back in about an hour. If it's more, we'll let you know." And then, just like that, he walked out the gate and disappeared down the side alley. At first, I didn't panic. I sat down with my coffee, now cold, and waited. I tried to scroll through my phone, but realized the Wi-Fi was down. I checked my phone data and tried to visit the city's utility website. Nothing mentioned about any power maintenance today. Still calm, I thought maybe it really was an emergency reroute, but something didn't feel right. After 40 minutes, I stepped outside and looked down the street. No other houses were without power. Air conditioning units were humming, windows glowed with lights, and no city trucks were in sight. That sinking feeling crept in. I went back to the meter. I wasn't an expert, but I noticed something odd. The box wasn't locked the way it usually was. The metal latch seemed scratched, almost like it had been tampered with. I decided to call the city utility helpline. After a short wait, I got through. I explained what happened about the man, the badge, the clipboard, the power cut. The woman on the other end paused for a long moment, then asked me to describe him again. When I did, she said firmly, "We don't have any scheduled work in your area today, and we don't send workers without notifying residents unless it's an emergency." Then came the punch. And even in emergencies, our employees carry electronic ID readers now. They don't use clipboards anymore. My heart dropped. "So you're saying he wasn't with the city?" she said. "I strongly recommend you call the police. This sounds like unauthorized access." I sat there, staring at the wall, mind spinning. Who was that man? Why did he cut my power? Was it just a prank, a robbery attempt? Was he coming back? I checked every door and window, all locked, nothing missing, but something inside me refused to just wait. I wasn't going to let it go, not this time. I started by checking my doorbell camera. Luckily, it had battery backup and still recorded the footage before the power went out. I pulled it up on my phone. There he was, clear as day. Beige uniform, reflective vest, clipboard, sunglasses, and that faint smirk as he stood there. I zoomed in on the badge. The name was blurry, but it looked handwritten. Odd. No official seal, just plastic. I took a screenshot and saved it. Then I zoomed in on his belt. That tool he used to cut the power, it didn't look standard. Almost like something you'd buy online, not city-issued. I started doing a reverse image search. No hits on the face. No matches on the badge, but something about the clipboard caught my eye. There was a small sticker on it, blue with white letters. It said WEX 12. I searched that. Turns out, WEX 12 is a tool line sold at a regional hardware chain 2 towns over. That gave me an idea. I called the hardware store and asked if anyone recently bought a batch of those clipboards or uniforms. The guy on the phone didn't know, but he agreed to check their security footage if I came in with the screenshot. I printed out the doorbell still and drove straight there. When I arrived, the manager took one look and said, "Yeah, I've seen him. He was here a few days ago. Bought a bunch of random stuff, clipboards, some vests, reflective tape, even a fake badge set we carry for costume work." He showed me the footage. Same guy, same clothes, same shades. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. I asked if they had any info on his purchase. Luckily, he paid with a debit card. The manager couldn't give me the details directly but said, "If you bring this to the police, we'll cooperate with them immediately." This guy didn't seem right to us either. So I did. I went straight to the local station, filed a report, showed the footage, gave them the screenshot. The officer was impressed with how much I'd gathered. He took my statement and told me they'd follow up with the store, pulled the security footage, and tracked the card info. But even after that, I couldn't shake the feeling. I wasn't just worried about my own safety. I kept wondering, was he doing this to others? Was he targeting homes when people were alone, elderly, vulnerable? That night, I posted the footage on a local neighborhood app with a warning. Fake utility worker cut my power. Be careful. I didn't expect much, but within 2 hours, 5 people commented that they'd seen the same man on their street. 2 of them said he came to their doors, but walked away when they asked questions. One woman said he tried to distract her, while a second person peeked around back. She had a dog, so nothing happened, but still. That meant he wasn't working alone. Now, it was more than just my house. Someone was going door to door, pretending to be a city worker, cutting power, or trying to gain access in. No one knew why, and I wasn't about to wait for someone else to get hurt. By the next morning, my post on the neighborhood app had spread further than I expected. Over 30 comments had appeared overnight, some sharing similar stories, others thanking me for the warning. A few people had doorbell footage of the same man approaching their houses, dressed in that same beige jumpsuit and vest. But what really caught my attention was one message. It came from a man to neighborhoods over. He said his grandmother's home had also lost power 2 days ago. She lives alone. The details were eerily similar, someone claiming to be from the utility company, cutting her power, then leaving. Except in her case, something else happened. Her garage door had been tampered with. She didn't notice right away because the automatic opener wouldn't work with the power out. But later, when her grandson came over, he found scratch marks near the lock and a piece of broken plastic lodged in the frame. It looked like someone had tried to force their way in. They hadn't succeeded, thankfully. But it confirmed something. I feared this wasn't just a prank or a harmless impersonation. This was a method. Someone was targeting homes, disabling power to test reactions or create opportunity. It made me feel sick. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked around my home, once a place of safety, now tinged with uncertainty. I had locks, cameras, I even had a dog. But I still felt exposed. Whoever he was, he'd been right there, on my property, close enough to reach into my power box and pull me into his plan without me realizing it. The police followed up later. That day, they had contacted the hardware store and retrieved the purchase history. The card used was tied to a prepaid debit card, bought with cash, which made tracking harder. But the officer said something interesting. They ran the security footage through facial recognition, and while it didn't return a name, it did connect to a pattern. A man with similar appearance and behavior had been reported in 3 other cities over the past 6 months. Always the same trick: disguises, fake badges, accessing properties by posing as a worker. But what made it disturbing was that in one of those cases, a break-in happened hours later. While the homeowners were out, no one had connected the dots until. Now I asked the officer, "So he's a professional?" He said, "Looks that way. Someone smart enough to stay off the radar. But he's getting sloppy. Repeating methods. That's how people get caught." I started to feel a mix of fear and anger. Fear that I had almost been one of his victims. Anger that he was still out there, walking freely, possibly planning his next house. I didn't want to just sit back and wait. So I went back to my footage and analyzed every second, every detail. I paused on the moment he looked directly into the camera. His sunglasses caught a glare, but there was a slight reflection like the shadow of a parked car behind him. I zoomed in and realized he hadn't arrived on foot, like I thought. A black SUV, barely visible in the background, was parked across the street. Tinted windows, no plates visible. But it was there. That led me to the next idea. I checked my neighbor's camera, which pointed toward the street. She was kind enough to let me review the footage. We rewound to the time he arrived, and there, it was the same SUV, slowly rolling up before stopping across from my house. He stepped out, looked around, and adjusted his vest. Another person stayed in the passenger seat, head barely moving. He wasn't working alone. Now I knew I was dealing with something bigger. Possibly a team. Possibly organized. I shared the footage with the police, but I also contacted a friend of mine, an ex-cybersecurity analyst turned private investigator. I sent him everything. Video, screenshots, timestamps. I asked him if he could help identify the SUV or track any patterns. He got back to me within a day. He told me that similar black SUVs had been reported in relation to a string of distraction thefts happening across the county. Always the same setup. Fake workers, convincing disguises. One person talks to the homeowner while the other checks for easy access open doors. Distracted occupants, poorly secured backyards. What made them clever was their timing. They never stayed long. 5 to 10 minutes, just enough to gather info or plant a future point of entry. Sometimes, they'd return later that week. Sometimes, they wouldn't return at all, just sell what they'd learned to someone else. And that's when it hit me. Maybe he didn't want to rob me himself. Maybe he was scouting. Maybe cutting my power wasn't the end goal, it was the beginning. What if he was testing reactions, seeing how long it took for me to come outside, seeing whether I left the house, watching where I kept spare keys or cameras? I couldn't rest after that. Every night, I double-checked every lock. I left lights on, I set motion sensors, and I didn't sleep deeply. I kept dreaming that I'd wake up to a broken window or a silent room where my computer used to be. Then, on the fourth night, I saw it. Motion alert at 2:13 a.m. Backyard camera. I rushed to my phone and pulled up the live feed. Nothing moving now, but the alert was real. I rewound the footage. A figure had stepped into my yard from the side fence. Briefly, less than 3 seconds. A hooded person. No face, no tools visible. But they stood there, looked at the camera, then turned and walked back the way they came. It was deliberate. A message they were watching to. The next morning, I printed out the image, brought it to the station. The officer assigned to my case looked at it and shook his head. "They're checking your response time," he said, "seeing if you've made yourself harder to hit. And if you had any doubts before now, you know for sure. They had plans for your place." That's when the decision came. I wasn't going to just keep defending. I needed to expose this guy. If they were bold enough to return, I had to be bold enough to shine a light on them. I asked the officer if there was any legal way to set a trap. He told me that while I couldn't take matters into my own hands, there were steps I could take to make it clear the property was monitored, secured, and not worth the risk. So I did. I installed floodlights with motion sensors. I added a loud verbal alert system tied to movement. And I printed warning signs with real case numbers and surveillance notices. I even bought a second camera system, hidden this time, covering blind spots. But I wasn't just fortifying, I wanted to find them. So I started driving around nearby neighborhoods late at night, watching for parked vehicles. I looked for black SUVs with tinted windows, unfamiliar cars lingering at odd hours. I mapped out patterns. 2 weeks passed without incident. Then, on a quiet Thursday night, I spotted a black SUV parked along a fence line not far from the neighborhood entrance. Engine off. No plates. Lights off. I circled the block and came around again. Still there. No one moved. I parked discreetly, took a photo, and sent it to the officer and my investigator friend. The investigator responded. Within 10 minutes, "I've seen that vehicle before." Now we were getting close. The moment I received that message from my investigator, "I've seen that vehicle before," everything shifted. It was no longer just a guess. Now there was a link, a pattern, a traceable connection to something bigger. He called me directly. A few minutes later, his tone sharp and focused. "This same SUV was spotted in a separate case I worked 3 months ago. Different city, same method. Fake maintenance worker, power outage, and a house down the block was burglarized the next night. The owner was out of town." My mind began putting the puzzle together, piece by piece. The disguise, the surveillance, the entry attempt, all fit. I asked him if he had a license plate from the previous incident. He said it was covered in both cases. These guys are careful. They know where cameras are and how to hide from them. But every mistake adds up. Eventually, they slip. The SUV I had seen near my neighborhood was now gone by morning. But it didn't matter. We had a photo, and now we had patterns. The investigator began digging deeper, running the image through vehicle recognition software, matching against local traffic cams, cross-referencing with open police reports. We were getting closer. In the meantime, I stayed alert. Every movement outside my home felt amplified. Every stranger walking by made my pulse tick faster. But something inside me had hardened. I wasn't just afraid anymore, I was determined. Then, something strange happened. 3 days later, I got a flyer in the mail. No return address, no company name, just a single sheet of paper with block letters at the top. "New energy grid upgrades, expect scheduled visits." It looked almost real. It used the city's colors. It even had a fake phone number at the bottom. I knew immediately this was part of the game. They were testing new tactics, sending fake notices, trying to make their visits look official before they even arrived. I gave the flyer to the police and posted it online. Within hours, people from 2 other neighborhoods said they'd received the same one, and that's when the trap started to take form. The investigator had an idea. He said, "If they're scouting homes and sending flyers, they're planning to return. What if we make your house the last one they'll ever try?" We worked together with the local authorities and set up a plan. A combination of live surveillance, marked and unmarked vehicles, and officers disguised as homeowners. My property would look vulnerable, just like before power box exposed. Lights set to a normal schedule, no obvious signs of police presence. But in reality, it was under a full net of surveillance. Cameras hidden in the hedges. 2 officers parked down the street. And my own house was wired tight. The waiting began. It was a week before anything happened. A week of me trying to act normal, going about my day while silently hoping they'd show. Every night, I checked the cameras, checked the motion sensors, reviewed the logs, and then, one night, it happened again. 2:47 a.m. The motion alert. Back fence. A single figure stepped onto the property, hooded, gloved. Same frame as before. He moved, quietly, heading straight toward the power box. Then he crouched, reached into his belt, and pulled out a tool. He wasn't fast this time. He was careful, focused, probably thought he was invisible again, but he wasn't single quotes. As soon as he touched the box, the camera above him snapped his photos silent but effective. Across the street, the unmarked car rolled forward. Another figure appeared near the side fence. Then a second man followed from the alley, watching his partner. That's when the officer hidden in my garage triggered the silent alarm. Within 30 seconds, the yard lit up like daylight. Flashlights, voices, commands, hands in the air. Drop the tools. The first man froze. The second tried to run. Bad idea. He made it to the edge of the fence before getting tackled by the officer waiting outside the perimeter. Both were arrested on the spot. I was upstairs watching it all unfold on my phone. Hands shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. Relief, victory. Months of tension released in one loud breath. They got him. They got both. Later that morning, I was called to the station. The lead officer sat me down, showed me photos of both suspects. I confirmed that the first man was the one who came to my door, posed as a utility worker, and cut my power. His name wasn't on any known official database. No driver's license, no city employment record, but he did have priors in another state. Theft, impersonation, tampering with government property, all under a different name. He had moved from city to city, using new identities, always one step ahead, until now. The second man was a runner, lookout, sometimes the getaway driver. He was the one likely parked in the SUV the first night. Police found it abandoned just 2 blocks away later that day. Inside were tools, stolen mail, multiple fake IDs, and a tablet containing maps of several neighborhoods. Mine included. What disturbed me most was that each map had homes marked in red. Mine was circled. I asked the officer, how many people do you think they hit before this? He sighed. Hard to say. But you stopped them before it got worse. It was hard to process. I wasn't a detective, I wasn't a hero. I was just a regular person who noticed something wrong and refused to ignore it, and in doing that, I had helped take down a team of criminals who could have hurt many others. The story didn't end there, though. Over the next few weeks, I was contacted by several other residents. People who had brushed off odd visits or unexplained power issues now wondered if they too had been targeted. I shared my footage, my story, my warnings, and little by little, we created a network of awareness. More neighbors installed cameras. More people reported suspicious flyers. The city utilities department even launched a campaign to educate residents about verifying workers and understanding what real maintenance looked like. I never expected to become the center of all that, but I was glad it happened. That, in the end, what started with one suspicious knock turned into a chain of events that revealed a quiet threat lurking behind a convincing smile and a clipboard. And the only reason it came to light was because I trusted my instincts. The man in the vest had chosen the wrong house. The arrest was only the beginning. Once the police had the 2 suspects in custody, everything started moving faster. Investigators found more evidence in the SUV: bags of tools, multiple burner phones, scribbled notes about different neighborhoods, and several items that didn't belong to either man. Labeled envelopes, mailbox keys, even a few pieces of jewelry stuffed into a hidden compartment under the back seat. It was clear they had been active longer than anyone had realized. Their operation wasn't random. It was organized, precise, and I had unknowingly exposed it. I was called back into the station a few days later. This time, the officer handling the case introduced me to someone new, an investigator from a larger agency. He specialized in fraud and impersonation crimes that crossed multiple jurisdictions. He looked tired, like someone who had seen far too many of these cases. We've been tracking cases like this for a while, he told me. This team isn't just 2 guys. We believe there's a network behind them, people who create the fake documents, supply the equipment, and even coordinate who hits what area next. He asked me to walk through everything again, in detail. Every word the fake worker had said to me, how he stood, how he moved, whether he made eye contact. I shared it all, along with the screenshots from my doorbell cam and the flyer I'd received. He took everything down carefully, connecting the dots with other reports. He said my neighborhood wasn't the first they'd hit, and definitely not the last. But the difference this time was that someone had documented everything and responded fast enough to stop it. That evening, I sat quietly in my kitchen, watching the sun drop beyond the fence line. I felt both grateful and strangely unsettled. Grateful that nothing worse had happened. Unsettled because now I knew how close it had come. If I hadn't trusted my instincts, if I hadn't followed up on the flyer or looked at my neighbor's camera, I might never have known until it was too late. A week later, I got a call. One of the suspects had confessed. Not out of guilt, but because they realized the game was over. They admitted to targeting neighborhoods with older residents, people who were likely to believe an official-looking badge and a kind voice. Their job was to pose as workers, disable the power, and create confusion or opportunity for theft. Sometimes it was mail. Sometimes it was packages. Sometimes it was just testing locks and windows to plan something bigger. They weren't always the ones who returned. They passed the information along to others. Part of the same ring. It wasn't just about burglary. It was a system of exploitation. And the more I listened, the angrier I got. People worked their whole lives to buy a home, to feel safe. And here were strangers playing a role, dressing up in fake uniforms and turning trust into a weapon. What really got me, though, was that many of their targets never even realized what had happened. The team was so quick, so practiced, that some residents just thought they'd had a technical outage or assumed the man at the door was real. The attackers counted on people doubting their own instincts. I decided I couldn't keep this story to myself. I started writing everything down, every moment, every detail. I took the footage and made a short video with captions explaining what happened, what signs to watch for, and what I had learned. I uploaded it to my neighborhood group, then to a few crime prevention forums. The response was overwhelming. People began sharing their own close calls. One woman in another city described how someone had come to her door with a clipboard and vest, asking to see her backyard gate. She didn't let him in, but afterward, her neighbor's home was broken into. Another man said his mother had lost a valuable necklace. She didn't even realize it until days later. Her power had gone out around the same time a fake worker came by. Each story confirmed what I now knew. For certain, this wasn't isolated. It was a strategy. And the only thing protecting people was awareness. Soon after, a local news station reached out. They had seen the footage and wanted to interview me. I hesitated at first. Not someone who likes the spotlight, but I agreed. Not for myself, but for the message. During the interview, I explained everything. How the fake utility worker approached me. How I noticed something didn't feel right. How I tracked him through my doorbell camera, followed the clue on the clipboard, and worked with police to uncover more. I shared the flyer, the SUV photo, the late-night visit, everything. The story aired the next evening and spread faster than I expected. It was shared on social media, picked up by national outlets, and reposted by community watch groups across the country. I started getting messages from people I'd never met, thanking me for speaking up, for helping them stay alert. Some even told me they caught suspicious individuals on camera because of what they'd learned. The part that hit me hardest came from a retired couple. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, just like mine. The husband had been scammed months ago, believing a man in uniform was there to check on their gas lines. He let him in. A week later, their savings were gone. He blamed himself, said he felt like a fool. But after seeing the interview, he realized it wasn't just him. He wasn't stupid. He was targeted. That to me was everything. In exposing this, I hadn't just stopped one team. I had helped break the silence, the shame that so many victims carry after being tricked. But the story didn't fade there. A month after the arrests, police uncovered more through the burner phones. They traced contact numbers that linked to other suspects. A small warehouse on the edge of the city was raided. Inside, they found hundreds of fake badges, uniforms, clipboards, and tools, all staged to mimic various service providers, utility workers, delivery drivers, even pest control. It was a full-scale impersonation operation. They found maps, notes, addresses. Some names were marked with check marks. Others were circled with dates next to them. My address was among them. It had a big red X drawn through it. I took that personally. When the lead officer showed it to me, he said, "You were supposed to be another victim. But instead, you became the reason we caught them." That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. There's a strange kind of peace that comes after fear, not the kind where everything's suddenly fine, but the kind where you know you faced something real and came out stronger. I didn't feel invincible, but I no longer felt helpless either. Even now, when I hear a knock at the door, I still pause for a second longer than I used to. I still double-check badges, still ask for ID, still trust that voice inside me that says, if something feels off, don't ignore it. Because what I learned through all of this is simple. It's not about being paranoid. It's about being prepared.